guys, welcome to a new tutorial. Today I'll be sharing a new video with you, which will be the first part of a series on how to retouch a fashion editorial. Now this series is going to be in 5 parts and it will include how to process your pictures, your raw pictures in Caption 1, how to do frame separation properly, how to do diagram properly, how to color grade for impact, and how to sharpen and export your pictures, and some other stuff like liquify and clean up and a whole lot of other stuff that have to do with retouching. So I'm going to start with this first part, which is going to be how to process your pictures in Camera Raw processing softwares. And for this particular tutorial, I'll be using Capture One Pro 21, and this is it, and this is what the interface looks like. If you are new to Capture One, you should be able to follow up, but if you can't, kindly check out some other tutorials on how to use Capture One as a beginner, and that will help you. But if you are already using Capture One, this is going to be more easier for you, I think. So let's get right into it. So this is what I have in Capture One, and first thing I want to do is I want to create a new session by clicking this plus button, this small plus button over here, and go to new session. Okay, so I can name the session with whatever I want, and let me just name this with fashion. Oh, that's wrong. Fashion editorial. Okay. So Caption One is going to open another window for me where I can work on. So now this is a fresh window, and I can now import my pictures into Capture One and start processing them. Now to import your pictures, all you have to do is come down to this import icon here, click on it, and a new window is going to open up like this. So it's going to ask you where you want to import your pictures from, which is going to be the folder on your PC where you copied your pictures to, and I'm going to go to that and click choose. I have this saved on my desktop. Yes, this is a fashion editorial, and I'm going to click review for import. So it's going to show me these are the 4 pictures that I think are the very best of this shoot. So I'm going to be using one of them for this whole tutorial. And if you want to use this picture that I'm working on particularly, and you want to practice with it, you want to do your retouching practice with it, kindly click the link down below to download it and just practice with it and follow up with me if you can. I think that would be the best for you, and you just try your hands on this picture first, and then you can try it on your own pictures and you can progress as you go. So I'm going to click import all, and the pictures are going to be dedicated one. I can start processing it. So there we have it. So I'm going to be working on this first picture here because I think it is a very good picture. And yes, one thing you have to know about Capture One is that the way it renders render colors, it's really good, and I will not say so much about that, but just know that Capture One render your colors really good, because it kind of gives your images the base profile of your camera, and it applies it immediately. The pictures are imported into the software, so I won't get too much into that. So I will turn on this exposure warning icon because I want to see where my highlights are clipping, and I want to avoid that as much as I can. Now, the things that you have to look out for when you are processing your raw images is one of the most important things I feel is the level of details, and the level of the details of your highlights and your shadows, which is very important, because you don't want to lose any details to your highlights and your shadows, be it in the background or in the subject itself or in the clothing that your subject is wearing or in any other part of your image or in the skin. You don't want to lose any details in both the highlights and the shadows. So you want to keep that in mind. And another thing that you want to keep in mind and you want to really be considerate about is the general look of your picture color wise. So what is the overall picture looking like? Does it look harmonious enough? And it's not really about color grading right now, but you just want to get a picture to a place where it looks more harmonious, and I'm going to show you what that means soon. So let me go to this tool here, the straighten tool. I just want to straighten this picture because I feel it's bent over to the side a bit. Now, the way to use this tool is to just find a straight line in your image and just run the line over it, and it's going to straighten the picture for you automatically. I'm going to press H to go back to the hand tool. Yes, and it looks straightened now. Now, let me go to the toolbars that I have here. So I can click on check chromatic aberration because I want to make sure that I don't have chromatic aberration. Let me go to exposure here and just work on the exposure before I get back to color. We get back into that in a minute. So what I want to adjust first is I want to check my highlights because I don't want to lose any details to my highlights. So I'm going to bring this down just a notch to a point where I'm not losing details in any part of my image. Now you want to be careful with this because you don't want to make the mistake of reducing your highlights all the way down, because you're just going to lose some level of contrast in your image if you reduce your highlights too much. So you want to look at what you're doing and you want to adjust accordingly. Don't just adjust it mindlessly by just picking a random number. And another thing is you can actually forego some things when it comes to highlights, like what I'm seeing on the dress right now. You see all this red, little red marks. It's telling me that the highlights are clipping, and I just wouldn't mind that because this is a very small area relative to this picture. It is very, very small, and it really won't matter. So if I turn off this exposure warning icon, you can see it really doesn't matter. So you want to be mindful of that as well, so that you don't just keep reducing the highlights in your images. All right, now let me turn it back on, and I'm just going to ignore all that red marks for now. And my shadows, I think my shadows are pretty good. The shadows are the dark parts of the image, obviously, and the highlights are the bright parts of the image. So the shadows are really good, because the shadows are this part of the image where it's not really bright. But I'm just going to bring it up just a little, and if I bring it up too much, it's going to flatten the picture, and I really do not want that. I don't want my picture to be flattened. I want to maintain a certain level of contrast. So I'm going to bring it up. Let me take this back to 0, and I'm just going to bring it up a little to recover some details in the shadows. Okay, just a little. Now that's too much. Okay, let's stay right around 9. Yeah, I think that's good. Then I'm going to come to my white. I'm going to bump this up because I want more contrast. And one of the things that makes your retouching not too good is because you really don't understand the product you're working on most times. You can't tell if you're working on a fashion editorial or a proper fashion image. Now there's a difference to those kind of retouching. There's a different approach to it. You don't want to approach a fashion editorial the same way you're going to approach a regular fashion image, because with fashion editorials there's a wide level of fantasy that is required, and not necessarily required, but there's a wide level of fantasy that is allowed. Unlike if you're shooting a regular fashion picture where you are more concerned about the clothing or a particular accessory and it has to be lighted properly and everything. But when you're working in a fashion editorial, you can go wild with it, you can do different stuffs with it. I hope what I'm saying makes sense to you. So this is a fashion editorial, and I want to be extreme with my retouching, and I can be extreme because it's an editorial. Okay, so I'm going to pull up my white just to get some contrast back in there, and just to get rid of confusion, I'm going to turn this exposure warning off because it's actually showing those red marks and I'm starting to hate them. Okay, I'm going to bring down my blacks, and this is just like creating an S curve in Photoshop to get some contrast. The white and the black settings here, that is what they kind of feel like here. So if I bring down my glasses, you will see it. I'm going to gain some contrast in this image. Now I'm going to go to contrast button itself, and I'm going to bring it up because I want this picture to be more contrasted than what it looks like right now. To me, it's looking too soft, and I want some definition in between the highlights and the shadows. So I'm going to bring up the contrast button. Yeah, you can see the changes it did there. So it boosted the contrast and it made the picture pop a little bit more. And that is what I want for this picture. I want it to be more edgy, not extremely edgy, but I want it to be more edgy. I want it to have more vibrance and more contrast to it. I don't want it to be soft at all, because the whole vibe of this picture, the whole mood of this picture does not represent a soft feeling or something. I want it to be edgy. I want her to look powerful. I want her to look strong. And if I start bringing down my contrast, I'm going to be negating that mood. So think about the mood when you're working on your retouching and your processing, your camera processing as well. So I'm going to bring up the contrast again so that I can get a little bit more somewhere around there. Yeah, the saturation looks good to me and the brightness is perfect. Okay. Then the next thing I'm going to do to boost my contrast even more is come down to this levels adjustment button and bring this up. This is the highlight. I'm bringing the highlights up now, but it's not like this particular highlight. This one is different. So this does it in a more subtle way, and this one is totally different. So I'm going to bring this up just to gain more contrast. And I'm going to bring the shadows down. That is not looking too good, so let me take it back to like 1, and I'm going to bring the mid-tones up just to brighten the whole image up a little bit, just a little bit. Okay, that's good. Now let's see the before and after. And yes, this is what the picture looks like before. And this happens to be like my favorite button in Capture 121 because it's really cool. You can easily check it before and after without having to duplicate your pictures, and it works really well. So this is the before, and this is the after. Before, after, before, after. Now if you look at the after image, you'll see that I've been able to bring in more contrast into the clothes and into the jewelries and into the face of the model, and the whole picture is looking more contrasted generally because that is the mood that I'm going for. I want it to look strong and more powerful than what I have earlier on. Like this is really flat. Okay, so let me turn this off, and now we can go back to our color tab and adjust some settings here. So the first thing I want to adjust here is my Kelvin. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to reduce the Kelvin just a little because I don't want the picture to look too warm. Now my Kelvin is going to either be warm or it's going to be either cold or warm. Now my Kelvin is going to be either cold or warm, so I can warm it up or turn it down depending on the look that I'm trying to go for. And the tint, I think the tint is just perfect. There's not too much green or magenta in it, but let me just check. I think I'm good. So I'm not going to affect the tint at all. Now this is a very smart tool in Capture One, and it works really well. Now the way I use this tool is I'll come down to master, and I'm going to drag this button all the way down here, and I'm just going to check which of these colors works best and which one makes my picture look more harmonious. Now this is what I was saying about being harmonious. Let me just revert this back to its default. So this is what I was saying about being harmonious with your picture, with your colors. Now this is not color grading. I'm not trying to color grade this picture here. I want to give it a base. I want to give it a color that is much more cohesive. Yes, I want to give the color that's more cohesive so that I can color grade it more easily in Photoshop. I don't want this picture looking like it's having the millions of color that looks so different from each other. So I want to harmonize it, and that is what I'm going to do with this color balance tool in Capture One. So I'm going to drag this all the way to the edge, and I'm going to scroll around and see which color works best. Now, for this particular picture, I want my model to look kind of gold, which explains the choice of the fabric that I went for and the choice of the accessories that I went for. So I want her to look more gold and I want her to look more royal. Okay, and I'm going to try to find a color that is going to represent that. Now, for you to know more about color and how color works, you should check courses on color theory. They really help. I've learned a lot by checking color theory and how it works and everything. So I'm just going to check and I'm going to drag this around. See, no, that's not going to work. No. Okay, right, it's not going to work. Okay, I think somewhere around there is really good because our skin is popping, the fabric is popping, the background is looking more nice, and yes, that's what I'm going to do. I could alter the background a little bit later, but this general feeling, this overall look is the kind of look that I'm going to go for even after I color grade. So I'm going to just use this to set up my base. So now that I have this, I'm not going to leave it in its full effect like this, obviously, because that would be crazy. I'm not going to do that. So I'm going to bring this down and I'm going to add in the saturation just a little. I'm not going to use the all saturation levels, Okay, I think somewhere around there. Yeah, somewhere around there makes a lot of sense. Now, you might not be able to see this, but I will show you with my before and after button, so you can see that the look has changed a little bit. So all these little changes, those subtle changes, makes up for a lot of changes in the result that you get. And this 3-way settings, it's actually showing you the shadow with one highlight in one place, but I'm going to affect it individually. Now, in the shadows in this picture is going to be where the skin of my subject is, because the highlight is it's all about the background and hair, and the highlight is very dominant, so the shadow is going to be in the skin. So if I try to add some colors into the shadows, you see that skin and some parts of this image is going to be more in this parts, and all those parts will be more affected than this background. So if I try to add in some colors to the shadows, this is what I get. Okay, now the sky is not even affected at all, because that's where the highlight is. So I'm going to add in yellow again, because I want our skin to pop more, or something around here, maybe orange, yes, to make it more warm and give her that royal feeling, that royal vibe that I'm going for. Again, I'm going to bring the saturation down and add in this very subtly. Okay, yeah, right about there, looks good to me. Okay, then I'm going to come to my highlight before I go to my midtone, and I'm going to add in some blues or cyan into the highlight, because I want the sky to remain its original color. It's Harmattan in Nigeria, so the weather is terrible. There's no details in the weather in the sky at all. Everything was blank white, and there was more like fog around, and everything is just looking flat and terrible. But I had to do this shoot, and I found a way to do this shoot. And if you actually want to see the BTS, the behind the scenes videos of how I shot this image, there's a link down below that you can check, and I'll put the card up here in the video so you can check it, and you can just check my other videos so you see the BTS video. So I'll link it somehow to this particular video so you can see. Now let's add that blue into the highlights. Now, just because I say the highlights is all the sky and everything, there's still some highlights on the dress and all, but I'm targeting the sky now, and I'm just going to scroll around. I'm sure that what I want to add is somewhere in between here and here. Okay, in between here and here. So I'm just going to cycle around and see what works. I think that looks better instead of the sky looking so white and boring. So let me bring this down. and add it in very gently, very gently. Okay. Yeah, that looks good. That looks good. Now let's go to the mid-tone, and I'm going to warm it up generally by adding some little bit of yellow again. Now that's some green, some yellows. Okay. Yeah, I don't want to add a lot of that orange so that the picture doesn't look too nasty. At least the overall feeling of the picture, is what what the mid-tone is. So I'm just going to find the balance here. You have to be careful with this. You don't want to overdo it. If you overdo it, your picture is going to look like crap by the time you're done with this process. So I think somewhere around there is what I'm looking for. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to bring this down again and add in that color very gently. Okay. Now let's go back to my white balance. I think I need to warm it up a little bit more. Yeah, something around there, and I can still bring in some of the cyan or blue into my highlight. Yes, somewhere around there. Okay, now let's adjust accordingly. Now, you don't have to do one particular setting and say that's done. You can go back and refine your settings so that everything is looking more better. Now I think the highlights are way too bright here, and I'm just going to bring this down a little bit more, and I'm going to bring this highlight down, bring my whites down just a little, and I can fix that with another layer here, and I can just come here, click on this plus button here to create another layer, and I can pick a brush and I can just paint on this part of the image to darken it down a little so that the highlight, I don't want this part of the image contesting for the eyes of my viewer when they're looking at the picture. I want them to look at the whole picture, not at this bright part, because generally when we look at images like this, our eyes are focused on the bright parts or on the more saturated parts of the picture, which is the color part. So I don't want people looking at this. I want them to look at the picture overall. So I'm going to select this. This layer option works almost like the one in Photoshop. That is one of the things that is cool about Capture One as well. So I've turned on auto mask because I don't want the my selection to be going all around. So I'm going to select that part, and I can press M to see the mask of the selection that I've made. And this part I think is too bright as well. And this part, okay, and this part too. Yes. So what I can do now is, I think this place is way too bright as well. So what I can do now is I can turn off the mask by pressing M again, and I can bring down the highlights on the fabric only. Okay, that looks better. So if I turn the layer off, that's what I have, and if I turn it on, this is what it looks like, and that looks a whole lot better than what I have earlier. So I'm going to bring it down more. Yeah, and that is what I have now. Okay, so now I'm going to take this picture into Photoshop by exporting it, and we're going to get into frequency separation. And this is how you export your picture out of Capture One to Photoshop. Just click on the export button here, and there are some settings that you can do. There are some settings that you have to put in place before you take it into Photoshop. So when I click on export, it's going to bring out this interface, this window, and it's going to ask me for the destination of the picture that I'm trying to export. And most times I would choose the select folder in the folder that I created, in the section that I created when I opened Capture One in the at first. So fashion editorial, that's the folder section, and I'm going to click select, I'm just going to select folder, and when I export that picture, that's the folder that the picture will be exported to, so I can go back in there and check. Then I wouldn't bother myself about the naming of the file, and I'm just going to be bothered about the export recipe. So the format that I use mostly is TIFF, and it works really well with Photoshop and it's seamless. You can use PSD as well, but I just figured that with TIFF you can preview your pictures directly in Windows Viewer. Like you can check what you can see the picture, and it just makes things easier for you. And the bits I'm going to use the 16 bits because it allows for much more details. And the options, I'm going to leave it at uncompressed. I don't want the picture to be compressed at all. And the profile I'm going to be using is the Adobe RGB. Okay, Adobe RGB 1998. The resolution is going to be left at 300 pixels per inch. The scale, I'm going to leave it at fixed, and I'm going to leave it at 100%. And I'm going to tell Capture One to open this picture with Adobe Photoshop CC 2019 once it's done exporting it. So I'm going to click on Export, and I'm going to wait for Capture One to open it up in Photoshop. And once it does that, I'm going to start retouching my picture with the frequency separation technique.